There is a moment, quiet, almost impolite, when a person begins to notice what others glide past. It happens softly, like a shift in the air. You walk into a room and before a single word arrives, something in you already knows. The tension sitting on people's shoulders. The smiles held a second too long. The little dramas masquerading as seriousness. It's as if everyone else is following a script you've somehow misplaced and you're left reading the room instead of the lines. And with that noticing comes a faint ache, the kind that curls behind the ribs. Not pain, but recognition, the outsider's recognition. The awareness that you see beneath the surface, while everyone else is still admiring the wallpaper. That you feel what people are trying so hard to hide, sometimes more clearly than they do. You didn't choose this. It just opened inside you one day, the way dawn opens the world. Some people call it sensitivity. Others call it overthinking. But deep down, you've always wondered, why do I see what others don't? And why does it hurt? The question rings quietly, the way truth often does. And if we are honest, seeing clearly is not the gentle enlightenment everyone romanticizes. It shakes the ground beneath you. It tugs at your solitude. It rearranges the way you move through the world. Yet this too is part of the invitation. The invitation to consider that what you're feeling isn't confusion or misalignment. It's perception, a deeper perception that doesn't settle for masks or rehearsed emotions. It is not madness. It is not fragility. It is the first spark of insight, a spiritual sensitivity that has always been yours, long before you knew what to call it. And still, a whisper lingers. If this is a gift, why does it so often feel like a curse? That question is not a flaw in your vision. It is a doorway we will walk through together. And if something in you has already leaned toward that doorway, if a part of you already feels spoken to, then gently, tap-like. Not as a transaction, not as applause, but as a small nod to that quiet, stubborn part of you that refuses to stay asleep. The story begins here, but unraveling, that comes next. There comes a day when you notice the world is built from agreements no one remembers agreeing to. Money, titles, schedules, expectations, things everyone treats as immovable, inevitable, sacred. But when you look closely, you see the seams. You see the way meaning is stitched into paper, how time is pressed into clocks, how status is held up like a cardboard set piece in a theater production that's been running for generations. You didn't ask for this clarity. You didn't go searching for it like a pilgrim. It simply arrived, uninvited, inconvenient, and utterly honest. One moment you were playing along with everyone else, nodding at the seriousness of meetings and deadlines, wearing the costumes you were handed. And the next moment, something inside you whispered, almost amused, none of this is as solid as they think. And it wasn't cynicism. It wasn't superiority. It was recognition, the kind that gently unravels illusions you didn't realize you were holding. It's strange, isn't it, to watch people argue over rules as if the stakes are life itself, when you can see so clearly that the rules were invented by someone long forgotten. To watch people fight for approval, for image, for victories no one will remember. You sit in the same room, breathe the same air, and yet your awareness stands a few steps behind the curtain where the machinery of the play is visible. And once you see the machinery, it's impossible to unsee it. Life continues its theater around you, the hurried footsteps, the scripted conversations, the rituals of productivity. People cling to these illusions not out of foolishness, but out of comfort. It is easier to believe the stage is the whole world than to question the purpose of the play. And perhaps you've tried, once or twice, to gently pull at the edges of someone's certainty. Perhaps you've asked a question too deep, or laughed at a seriousness they weren't ready to let go of. That's when you noticed it, the discomfort, the way truth makes people shift in their seats. But remember, this awareness isn't rebellion. It isn't a mistake. It's simply the truth tapping you on the shoulder, reminding you that your perception reaches further than you've admitted. Yet another question rises. What happens when you stop pretending along with the game? The answer is coming, and it brings its own kind of danger. There is a particular silence that fills certain rooms, a silence stitched together with unspoken fears, unfinished thoughts, and the faint tension of people trying very hard to seem fine. Asha knew that kind of silence well. She carried it home with her some nights, the way someone might carry the echo of a song they didn't like but couldn't forget. When she stepped into the sleek conference room that morning, the tension brushed against her before anyone even glanced up. It was in the stiff shuffle of papers, the way a coworker's laugh cracked at the edges, the almost imperceptible flinch when the manager entered. Small details easy to miss, unless you were the kind of person who saw beneath the surface before the surface even spoke. Most people in that room were doing what people everywhere have been trained to do, performing stability, performing competence, performing the version of themselves they hoped others believed in. But something in Asha always drifted past the rehearsed lines toward the truth beneath them. She could sense the burnout tightening one colleague's shoulders, the fear hiding behind the perfectly curated calm of another. She didn't judge them for it. She simply noticed the way one notices a shift in weather. And then, because she was honest in the way that makes people uncomfortable, she named what she saw, quietly, gently, almost apologetically. The reaction was immediate, a subtle recoil, a tightening of expressions, a shared glance that said she had stepped beyond the invisible boundary everyone else had silently agreed to respect. Truth, especially the soft kind, tends to expose the mask others would rather keep in place. They weren't angry with her. They were startled by being seen. This wasn't the first time Asha had felt the sting of that distance, and she was not alone. Across the country, in a glass-walled office in Chicago, Lena felt the same thing earlier that year. She sensed tension before the first greeting, noticed exhaustion masquerading as irritation, saw the small lies people wrapped themselves in like fragile armor. When she named it, again, gently, she too received that same startled, defensive stare, as though she had broken a spell everyone else needed intact. Both women went home wondering if they were too sensitive or too strange or simply out of place. But the truth was simpler. They saw clearly in rooms where others were still pretending, and clarity, uninvited, unfiltered, can be a lonely companion. Yet beneath that loneliness was something else, something stirring just out of reach. The beginning of understanding why such vision feels both burden and blessing. That understanding waits in the next breath. There is a quiet rule in human society, rarely spoken aloud but enforced with remarkable consistency. Do not disturb the illusions people depend on. The moment you do, the air shifts. Faces tighten, voices sharpen, and suddenly you find yourself standing at the edge of a circle that once welcomed you. The world has always reacted this way, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of disruption, fear of reflection, fear of truths too bright for unprepared eyes. The world attacks what it fears to understand. You felt that sting before. The moment someone called you too much, not because you were overwhelmed, but because your clarity unsettled them. The moment a friend accused you of overthinking, when all you did was point gently toward the thing they already knew but weren't ready to admit. The moment someone dismissed you as dramatic, simply because you noticed trauma woven into their bravado. Sometimes the rejection is sharp. Sometimes it's subtle, a shift in tone, a quiet distancing, a sudden formality that didn't exist before. But here is the truth the world rarely tells you. This backlash is not evidence that you are broken. It is evidence that your vision brushes too close to the illusions others cling to. And illusions, when threatened, defend themselves through the people who rely on them. History never contradicts this pattern. Mystics, philosophers, the quietly perceptive, they have always drifted toward the margins. Not because they sought exile, but because clarity has a way of unsettling established comfort. Think of the mirrors people avoid, not because the mirror lies, but because it reflects too much. Those who see clearly become mirrors, not by intention, but by nature. And mirrors are rarely welcomed. Still, the danger is not in the seeing itself. The danger lies in misunderstanding how the world responds to clarity. When someone flinches away from your insight, it is not your truth that they reject. It is their own unpreparedness to face it. When they label you difficult, dramatic, or strange, what they are really saying is, you notice things I cannot yet bear to see. The cost of clarity, then, is not merely the loneliness it invites, but the responsibility it demands, to hold what you see without hardening, to witness without wounding, to reflect without shattering the fragile illusions others still need. And yet a deeper question begins to form in the quiet that follows. If clarity carries such a cost, could it also be the beginning of something freer, something more alive? The next step waits just beyond that question. There is a particular heartbreak that comes not from what you've lost, but from what you can suddenly see. It's the moment you look around and quietly realize how few people share this odd, piercing clarity. The moment you sense that you are awake in a room still full of sleepers. That kind of loneliness has its own temperature, cool, spacious, a little echoing, and for a while you might believe the echo means you're alone. But that belief, as convincing as it feels, is the most persistent illusion of all. The truth is softer and harder at once. You are not the only one. You are just placed far apart from those who see as you do. Scattered across cities, continents, timelines. We are like lanterns left in different rooms of the same house, each glowing quietly, thinking the others went out. But they didn't. They're simply out of sight. Perhaps you've noticed this. Every now and then you meet someone whose eyes hold the same worn gentleness you've earned. Someone who pauses before speaking. Someone who listens below the surface. Someone who has also been called too sensitive, too strange, or too honest, and carries those words the way one carries old stones, heavy at first, but later almost sacred. These people do exist. They always have. They always will. The feeling of being an island is real, but the map is wrong. You are part of a quiet constellation of people who see the world without its usual disguises. And just because they are not standing beside you doesn't mean they are not walking the same inner terrain. Awareness does not gather in crowds. It gathers in pockets. And so, this is where the path turns from solitude into recognition. If any thread of this feels like your story, if any sentence settles into you like something long overdue, leave a trace in the comments. A word, a symbol, a breath. Not as a performance, but as a soft signal flare. You might be surprised how many others recognize themselves in your light. Because the truth is, Those who see clearly always find one another eventually. Sometimes it begins with a single quiet voice answering back, and from here the path moves towards something even more delicate. The danger that clarity can twist into superiority, another illusion waiting to be undone. There is a subtle shift that happens after someone begins to see through the world's illusions. At first, the clarity feels like a gentle release, a loosening of the knots that held your identity together. But soon, almost without noticing it, another voice appears, softer, sneakier. It whispers, "You see more than they do. You understand what they don't. You're different." It's flattering in the way a warm spotlight is flattering, comforting, yet blinding. This is the hidden trap of awakening, the temptation to build a pedestal out of the very illusions you just dismantled. It's an old trick of the ego, wearing new robes. Instead of wanting to be admired for success or beauty or charm, it now wants to be admired for depth, for insight, for enlightenment. Many fall for this. Almost everyone tastes it. And yet nothing separates you from the world more quickly than believing you stand above it. The irony is almost humorous. The moment you think you've transcended the game, you're deeper in it than ever. You've simply switched costumes. Awakening was never meant to turn you into a judge peering down from a height. True clarity brings you closer to people, not further away. It softens you. It humbles you. It returns you to your humanity with a tenderness that feels like remembering something ancient. There is a gentle discipline in this, noticing how easily bitterness can grow when others don't understand you, how quickly cynicism can bloom when someone mocks your insight, how fast superiority can masquerade as wisdom. These reactions are natural but not inevitable. They are simply shadows cast by the light you're learning to carry. Real freedom begins when you stop needing to be right, stop needing to be recognized, stop needing others to awaken just because you have. When you allow others their dreams, their pace, their illusions, without judgment, without urgency, something inside you loosens again. You become spacious where you once were sharp. You can laugh at yourself, at life, at the seriousness you once held like a shield. Awakening isn't an escape from being human. It is a richer, fuller way of being human. And to walk that path without falling into spiritual arrogance is to hold your vision with both humility and humor. Ahead lies a story of what happens when someone stops chasing shadows, but that belongs to the next unfolding. There is a moment in every seeker's life when the chase becomes louder than the goal and the exhaustion becomes louder than the desire. Raphael had reached that moment long before he admitted it. He lived in Los Angeles, where ambition hangs in the air like heat, constant, shimmering, impossible to ignore. For years he had run after applause as if it were oxygen, chasing numbers, recognition, the elusive flicker of being seen. To the world it looked admirable. To him, it felt like sprinting after a shadow that always slipped just out of reach. The night everything changed was remarkably quiet. No dramatic failure, no confrontation, no great collapse. Just a failed audition, a parking lot lit by a single trembling street lamp, and the sound of his own breath, thin, tired, honest, for the first time in years. It was there, in that unremarkable corner of the city, that something inside him cracked open, not with violence, but with a kind of mercy. He finally saw how much of his life had been a performance inside a larger performance, how tightly he had held the illusion that success would save him. The realization wasn't sad. It was relieving, like removing a costume that had grown too heavy. So Raphael did something rare. He stopped running, not dramatically, not rebelliously, but quietly, like someone choosing to sit by a river after years of forcing their way upstream. He began playing music in small cafes, on street corners, in parks where no one knew his name and no one cared who he was supposed to be. And it was there, stripped of ambition, stripped of pretense, that something astonishing happened. People began to listen, really listen. Not because he asked them to, not because he sought their approval, but because the notes finally came from presence rather than hunger. It was in its own way a small awakening. The world leaned in the moment he stopped clutching it. His relationships softened. His work deepened. His anxiety loosened its grip. Nothing outside had changed. The skyline was the same, the traffic the same, the city the same. But Raphael saw it all differently. And that difference transformed the world. Not outwardly, but through him. This is the quiet proof hidden in so many lives. When you stop chasing shadows, the light finally knows where to find you. And once you stand still long enough to feel that, the path ahead begins to shift in ways you could never force. Which brings us to the question that follows every awakening. How do you keep walking once the old chase no longer calls your name? Awakening is often misunderstood as a singular event, a dramatic flash of insight that permanently rearranges a life. But the truth is gentler and a little more mischievous. Awakening doesn't fix life. It simply adjusts the lens through which life is seen. After that, the world remains the world, messy, beautiful, contradictory, full of deadlines and dishes and people who drive too fast or speak too loudly. What changes is the way you move through it. There are days when clarity flows like a quiet river and you feel the simplicity of existence resting softly around you. And then there are days when the old noise returns, the same insecurities, the same doubts, the same reactive patterns that you thought you had left behind. This ebb and flow is not a failure. It's the nature of consciousness learning to walk again after shedding the armor it once relied upon. No one stays awake every moment. Even sages blink. The challenge is not to maintain a permanent state of enlightenment. It's to remember, gently, again and again, what you've already seen. To catch yourself before you get swept back into the frantic rhythm of the world. To pause long enough to hear the quiet truth beneath the surface. To return as many times as it takes to yourself. And that remembering doesn't happen by force. It happens through small reminders, moments, words, encounters, breath. A sentence you hear at the right moment can tip you back into presence. A story can bring you home. A way of seeing can soften your whole being. This is why paths are walked, not jumped. They unfold with the patience of someone who loves you too much to rush you. So if something in these reflections has helped anchor you, even briefly, to the clarity you're already carrying, consider subscribing to this channel. Not out of obligation, not as a transaction, but because sometimes the right words at the right moment are enough to keep you awake in a world that invites sleep at every turn. Think of it as leaving a lantern lit for your future self. Because from here, the path does not rise upward. It deepens inward. And the deeper you walk, the more the world begins to shift. Not because it changes, but because you do. Beyond this point lies a new way of dancing with the dream itself. There is a moment, quiet, almost mischievous, when a person finally realizes the universe has been playing a game far older than they are. Life, with all its noise and deadlines and tangled human dramas, is not the rigid machine it pretends to be. It is a play, a dream, a choreography unfolding in ways too intricate to fully grasp. And awakening is simply remembering this, not as an idea, but as a sensation that settles into the body like an exhale. Once this shift happens, everything softens. You move differently, not because circumstances have changed, but because you are no longer imprisoned by them. You begin to understand that the arguments people cling to are lines in a script they forgot they were reciting. The victories and failures that once felt monumental are suddenly seen as props, useful perhaps, but not ultimate. And your own identity, once so heavy and urgent, becomes a costume you can slip on and off with surprising ease. This isn't detachment. It's playfulness, the kind that arises when you no longer mistake the role for the actor. There is a relief in this, deep and quiet. You can care without collapsing. You can strive without desperation. You can love without clutching. You begin to dance with the dream, rather than trying to dominate it, like someone swaying with a melody they no longer need to understand in order to trust. Yet even this freedom carries a shadow, because while you dance lightly, others might panic at your calm. They may misinterpret your ease as apathy, your clarity as coldness. They may wonder why you laugh when they tremble, why you breathe when they rush. This misunderstanding is ancient. It has followed every awakened soul across centuries. But still, it surprises you. And this is where the paradox ripens. To see the dream is liberating, but to be seen dancing inside it can be unsettling for those still caught in the seriousness of their roles. The world does not always understand the weight you've let go of, but understanding is not required. Only presence. Only the gentle humor of someone who knows the stage is temporary and the performance brief. Only the willingness to keep dancing, even when others do not hear the music yet. Still, a quiet question arises. If you're dancing in the dream, and the world doesn't yet know it's a dream, what responsibility do you carry now? The answer waits just beyond the next breath. There is something strangely contagious about inner freedom. Not loud, not persuasive, not dramatic, just quietly infectious. One calm person in a panicked room can shift the atmosphere without uttering a word. One grounded presence can steady an entire conversation. One honest gaze can soften someone's defenses without explaining anything at all. You've likely seen this happen. You may have even been the one who unknowingly steadied others simply because you refused to be swept up in their storms. This is the quiet leadership of those who see clearly. The world teaches us to influence through effort. Speak more, push harder, assert yourself. But the deeper truth is that presence carries its own strange gravity. You don't need to preach, argue, or convince. In fact, the more awakened you become, the less those impulses arise. Your life becomes teaching. Your stillness becomes the anchor. Your clarity becomes the mirror. And yet, even with this quiet power, a whisper of doubt sometimes lingers. Am I the only one walking this way? Am I the only one who feels this? It is easy to forget that inner freedom radiates outward, whether you intend it or not. That your calm affects others, even the ones who never admit it. That your way of seeing gives permission for others to soften, to breathe, to question the scripts they've been handed. You are not alone in the dream. You are simply early to remember. And sometimes someone in your life, someone you'd never expect, is closer to awakening than they appear. A friend collapsing beneath invisible pressures. A coworker staring through the illusion, but afraid to say it out loud. A family member quietly yearning for a different way of being. One spark can open a door for them. One gentle nudge can remind them they aren't strange, they're simply awake. So if someone in your world feels like they're standing on the edge of the same seeing, share this video with them, not as persuasion, but as recognition. Sometimes all a person needs is the smallest reassurance. Not that they're right, but that they're not crazy, only awake. And still, a deeper question remains. If awakening spreads quietly, then where does the real danger lie now? The next revelation waits just ahead. There is a strange moment in the journey of seeing clearly, a moment most people never speak of because it feels too uncomfortable to name. After the loneliness, after the misunderstandings, after the sting of being the mirror no one asked for, something subtle begins to shift. You notice that the real danger isn't the world rejecting you. It's the growing temptation to reject the world. It begins innocently enough. A quiet superiority in the way you watch people cling to their illusions. A small distance you feel when others panic over things you now see as shadows. A gentle smugness in knowing you no longer believe in the masks that once governed your life. You tell yourself it's maturity or clarity or some kind of spiritual elevation. But beneath that is a sharper truth. Part of you is stepping away from the world not out of wisdom, but out of weariness. This is the turning point many seers stumble upon. After glimpsing the machinery behind the dream, it becomes easy to view the dream itself as beneath you, to judge instead of understand, to detach instead of engage, to hide rather than participate. And when you pull away long enough, something inside you begins to harden, not into strength, but into distance. Yet true seeing was never meant to isolate you. It was meant to humanize you. Look closely at the wisest beings in history. They didn't float above the world in disdain. They sank deeper into its mystery. They embraced the flawed, the frightened, the confused, because they recognized those same shadows within themselves. Real clarity dissolves judgment. It softens the edges. It brings you closer to the beating heart of humanity, not further from it. To see through illusions is one thing. To remain tender, in spite of them, is another. People will misunderstand you. They will call you strange, dramatic, arrogant, or idealistic. Some will push you away. Some will cling to their masks. Some will shatter at the reflection you unintentionally offer. This is the cost of seeing. But the deeper danger is believing that you are above them. Awakening is not an escape from being human. It is the widening of what humanity can include. Your softness, your imperfections, your humor, your shadow, your compassion. The real path is the one that leads you back into the world with your eyes open and your heart intact. And now, having come full circle, we return to the question that began this entire journey. In the beginning, there was a question, simple, quiet, almost embarrassing to be spoken aloud. Have you ever felt awake in a room full of dreamers? Now, after all the stories, the shadows, the mirrors, the illusions, the tenderness, we return to it. Not to repeat it, but to understand it in a way you could not have understood before. Because now you know the ache beneath the question. You know the loneliness that comes from seeing what others miss. You know the danger, not only of being misunderstood, but of drifting too far from the world that still needs your warmth. And you know the strange, luminous gift hidden inside all of it, the freedom of seeing clearly. This clarity does not exempt you from life. It invites you deeper into it. When you stop rushing toward a future that never arrives, you begin to notice the life happening quietly around you. The breath you didn't realize you were holding. the bird you hadn't heard in months, the way light lands on someone's face, softening even their worry. These small moments are not distractions from awakening. They are its evidence. And in this stillness, something becomes unmistakably clear. You are not broken. You are not cursed. You are not alone. You are simply seeing a little further than most. Awakening is not a destination. It is a rhythm. Remembering and forgetting, a widening and narrowing, a dance between clarity and confusion. The dream continues, but your relationship to it has changed. You no longer chase shadows. You no longer mistake roles for identity. You no longer cling as tightly to illusions meant to soothe fears you've already faced. So when the world feels heavy again, as it surely will, return here. Not because these words contain the truth, but because they help you remember the truth already living in you. And if this message met you where you are, save it. Watch it again on the days you forget. Each time you will hear it differently, because each time you will be slightly changed. The universe sees through you as much as you see through it. And in that communion, the dreamer finally wakes to find they were never truly alone.